every time I come back, they put me on mute. Maybe somebody's trying to tell me something. So.
Not a you problem, John. It's a Zoom problem.
I know. Well, I think it's probably somebody up there in the atmosphere wanting me to like tone it down a little bit. So hey, San, I'll call you to finish our conversation. So sorry about that. Well, welcome everybody. I think we've got a great schedule today. I think, let's start off by anybody new on the call. I thought I saw some new faces. No, nobody new.
Oh,
wow. Oh. All right, that sounds good. Well, cool. What else did we want to go through?
I thought we'd open it up if anybody has any initiatives they want to mention real quick, or upcoming events or anything like that to share with the group that we could all collectively learn about, and then perhaps share on social or anything like that. So if anyone has anything, feel free to announce it.
I'll plug C2. We're going to do a version of it this year. It's not going to be as epic as it normally is, because it's sort of a comeback year after doing it digitally. But we're super limited in terms of normally like C2s, and so for people who don't know, C2s are innovation and business innovation, creativity and commerce is what C2 stands for. So Business Innovation Conference in Montreal every year, which we started about 7 years ago, and it got up to about 8,000, 9,000 attendees. And then we had this little thing over the last year and a half. So, but we're coming back. It's going to be interesting because we're limited to every room can only have 200 people. So it's going to be an interesting experience. But if I can get some tickets, I'm not sure because they've restricted it to last year's ticket buyers. But if I can, I'll definitely share.
Thanks, Son.
It was co-founded by Cirque du Soleil. So if you're all thinking, do we really need a new business conference? Then you've not been to one that was co-founded by Cirque du Soleil.
You should have started with that. So.
Yeah, totally. Love it. That sounds good. Anybody else that's new? No?
Hi, I'm Beth Forsnager. I'm new. Can you guys hear me?
Hey.
I did a double dial in, unstable net.
Good.
Nice.
Cool.
A friend of mine, Arthur Ranzier, told me about this group, and this is the first month I've had an opportunity to join. And the pre-materials you sent out were really interesting, and I'm excited to be here. And I love how you guys threw us in the deep end in the first 5 minutes. And I met another member here whose first join up was today as well. So appreciate the spirit of this group, and nice to meet you all.
Great to have you. The other person who's new, do they want to jump in too?
Yes, that's me. Hi.
Oh, hey, Nicholas.
I'm Nicholas. I was just on mute when you asked the first time, and then I was wondering why nobody's replying, and then you kept on talking. Yeah, exactly. I met Beth, which was really great in the first breakout room. I'm new. I'm from Germany, in Frankfurt. From Vicoland, we're a company enabling the procurement of freelance teams, and very excited for these calls to join and to get to know everyone.
That's awesome. Nicholas, thanks for joining. Nicholas and I had a really amazing conversation, and I just love what Vicoland's doing. I mean, it might be interesting for the whole group if you could just explain, because I think, one of the questions we've always had, is I think in the open talent community is getting people to refine the problem statement in a way that can be accepted to open talent, right? It's different than creating a brief and then putting it in a room with people that can morph on that thing. And I love your solution of kind of self-assembled teams, and then being able to, to see, clients can see different proposals. But if you could just kind of take a couple of minutes and just share with what you got going on, it'd be really great.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so as John basically explained, the idea came up through our founding shareholder, which is a digital agency in Germany doing like digital projects for large companies. And there we kind of saw that, hey, our business model with this agency having full-time employees, it's not working in the future because we're really inflexible and kind of expensive. And then we came to the solution, okay, let's work together with freelancers, but those were all single resource. And we could find platforms where we basically could find single people, but really what clients need is kind of you need teams who work together like an agency. You have this backbone where you have one invoice, one offer, one contract. And that's when the idea was born to create Vicoland, where we created a platform which basically enables freelancers to function like an agency. And it's a software product behind it where basically freelancers can contract under each other. It automatically creates a contract, but still the client has one contract with the general contractor, who's the main person in the middle. And then basically the client has one offer, one invoice, and one payment for all of the projects that the client does. So that's kind of the product behind it, and that's what we are basically doing. And the potential we see right now is basically that clients put briefings out there on the platform and can then kind of crowdsource like different offers from these virtual companies to then also compare offers and then also get kind of the best possible team for their project. So that's really in short what Vicoland is. Happy to explain further if you guys are interested.
Yeah, that's really great, Nicholas. I know Steve and Barry, you guys have had a chance to talk to Nicholas too. And I think it's, and to me, what's super exciting is that we're seeing kind of this formation of new kinds of organizations, right? Where, it's gone from traditional organizations to kind of the freelance micro entrepreneurs to now reorganizing with software as kind of a connector. So anyway, something to take keep track of. And Nicholas, I want to make sure that we talk about, about that stuff, because as I write the book. So,
yeah.
Hey, Barry, so I'm so excited because Barry presented the playbook that we're going to talk about today to a bunch of executives. And I'm super curious. I got a great note last night, but I want to just check in and see, how did it go?
It went great. I have some physical copies that arrived. So it was looking really good, super quality, actually, really, really impressive. So great job to Mark and Money and the guys for organizing the printouts. So we presented to, I think, 12 chief execs this morning. It was a workshop on, open talent and the human cloud and how it can increase productivity. Small to medium-sized enterprise, so $100 million less, but really, really good coverage of leaders in the room. And it was really interesting. They loved the concept. Interesting, they didn't have a lot of preconceived ideas, or if they did, it was negative about the gig economy, sort of high volume, low quality. So part of what we did was educate them on what is open talent, what are human cloud models, how can you use it for different functions. We presented this sort of business map, if you like, with strategy, sales, marketing, finance, HR, operations, and let them think about how they could use the network organization model in their organizations to deliver services. And we went through all the different parts of the playbook, and it really made them think about how they could implement it in their organizations. So interesting, they were sort of thinking, that they got lots of ideas about how they could use it for strategy instead of traditional consulting, for sales support, for marketing, for social media, for user experience, and then of course for technology. So it was good. They were chomping at the bit to try it out. As you know, John, Roland from freelancer.com did a deal with them. So they got £1,000 in credit to play on freelancer.com, which they absolutely loved. And then they got copies of the networked organization playbook, which they loved as well. So it went down really well, so much interest. We'll be doing, I think, lots more of these training courses for this group of chief execs. It's from a group called vistage.com, which is like a sort of peer-to-peer chief exec and MD networking group. So there will now be a regular training session on networked organizations and open talent, which is great.
That's great. Is there going to be a follow-up to see what they produce with the $1,000 credit on Freelancer?
Yeah, so I mean, we'll be able to see from the login what they're doing, but they also took my details, and I'll follow up with them, and Roland will follow up with them as well. I don't know whether Roland's on the call. In fact, I think he's on holiday, but we'll see what exactly what they get up to.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks, Barry. Well, definitely.
Just to ask a question there. How do you ensure success, right? So kind of, John, what you were thinking about the outcome of the $1,000 investment.
Right.
And I haven't seen the playbook, Barry, I apologize, but is there enough in the playbook to help those execs experience success and not reconfirm their suspicions about, kind of low quality workers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question. There's this is a sort of a top-down approach, if you like, right? This is how you would implement an open talent strategy in your organization, which as chief execs, they're super interested in. But they're also sort of chomping at the bit to go bottom up and say, well, how could I use the £1,000 credit from freelancer.com to write my next speech or to start up my next PowerPoint, slide presentation. So they were like wanting to try it. And the good thing with the deal that we did with freelancer.com is they get their own recruiter. They get someone who's going to sort of help them to try and make sure it's as successful as possible. And then they get to interact with me and the resource team to help them. So there's no guarantees of success, of course. I would guess 50% of them will probably try it, and we might be able to help them, and 50% of them will say, oh, that was a nice idea, it's in their head, and then they'll go back to other priorities when they get back to their businesses. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but it's it's just another 12 leaders who've now got the idea of networked organizations and open talent, and have learned lots of things, lots of light bulb moments over the last, we've only just finished actually, the last 4 hours or so.
Well, that recruiter should help find the right talent at least. But there's a lot to it, as you know, to make it successful. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, those are good points. Those are good points, Neil. I think that, that's always, and as we've been writing the book, well, first I need to call out Mark and Aditya, both from Magenta, who've done great work on the playbook and now are helping me with the book. And I think, one of the things that you're talking about, Neil, and I think we're really focused on the book, and I would love to kind of have a dialogue before, then I'll share the playbook. But we're talking about the voice, and Mark, you jump in here because you're up to speed as much as I am. We had a great leadership, workstream leadership group meeting on, I guess it was on Tuesday, and San added, was kind of the provocateur that started the conversation. And the question is like, where do we position the book? Is it a top down, your organization can change, or is it what I'm finding from the top platforms is the frustration is, I talked to Hayden Brown a couple of weeks ago, and she said, my biggest frustration is that I'm working with all these amazing companies and all these amazing executives, but nobody will let me talk about them because it's the secret sauce, right? It's the secret sauce for their division. It's the secret sauce for their career. And there's this kind of, idea that I'm using it, even though maybe my organization isn't up to speed yet. So, the idea that the book could be positioned of like discovering what the secret sauce, what people that are using the secret sauce, the Balaji and Steve and Diane and other folks that have gone down the road. Lots of folks at Google are using it, but one of the things that Hayden says is that she can't even say that Google uses the platform, which is a real frustration. So one of the things we're debating, I think, on the book is how do we position? Do we position it as this is what your company needs, kind of top down? Because I believe Mike Morris has said it best. It's really needs to be top down support and bottom up success. Or do we focus on, hey, this is happening inside your company, and this is a secret sauce that the most successful people inside your company are using? Mark, did I capture that sentiment properly?
I think you did, yeah. I think there's great potential to try and pitch it to those people who want secret sauce and say this is the kind of strategy that will enable your success. My contention is that those people are likely to be very well networked within their organizations. They are typically very entrepreneurial. And so I think that they're people who could be great advocates and proselytizers for this as a way of getting stuff done.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, I would be a little cautious in that making it sound too simplistic, right? My concern in working with our clients and with gig platforms is that it's really very difficult to find the winners, right? You don't want to write a book on stock market investing saying, find the companies that are about to increase and explode and invest in those, right? It's just obviously overly simplistic. And so, there's a lot to making it successful, as I was just talking to Barry about. And so I think that you do need to obviously have kind of this introduction and pitch on this is what the best companies in the world are doing and will continue to do in the future for very clear reasons. But there's this complexity behind it that you need to be aware of. And here are some of the best practices to follow.
Yeah, great. Really, really great. Gavin, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I think you need to find the people that have a vested interest in unlocking the future. So typically people who have leadership and influence within the organization, the people who can own themes and can sponsor them. I think like it's very important that employees are involved, but I think the difficulty is that I've seen when employees come forward with innovation programs are not sponsored. So they just come forward with great ideas and they die because no one has the appetite to produce budget and resource to take them forward.
Yeah, great points. Really great points. Steve, nice comment. I mean, you want to add something there on your mass challenge?
I mean, I've been pushing this with startups wherever I can, just because I think they're the ones that are forming new organizations, right? And this is such an easier construct to build from the ground up than it is to change a large organization. But I think in the marketing, a lot of great comments here, but an important thing is this is a really robust tool, but it's also hard to use. Like it's not something that just, everyone can just in 3 days make amazing results. The capacity's there, but fitting it into a large organization is complex. And I think that's the piece that the way we've been marketing it a lot now is the world is really complex and moving really fast. And if you don't figure out how to use tools like this, it's at your own peril. And so it's the encouragement to actually use these tools, not because they're gee whiz cool, but rather they are necessary and they are powerful and they are worth the investment. So
great points. Hey, Brian Saltzalcom. Okay, somebody else want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to add onto what Steve shared there, that it's also important that as the platforms and the providers who are out in the marketplace start using consistency in the same language that's there.
For sure.
Because that will make it much easier for enterprises to say, okay, now I get it. I'm hearing the same thing from 3 of you. That's going to help drive adoption along the way. So I just don't want to lose that side of it.
Yeah, no, I think that. Yeah, for sure.
Ironically, I have to drop at past because I've got to help a client who are struggling with their open talent platform pilot to make it successful, because I think they thought it was going to be too easy. But I think the top-down training is essential. So those chief execs this morning, the light bulb moments on the art of the possible, but then equally and probably as important is the bottom-up training, so that the practitioners who are actually going to be doing it, liaising with the open talent platforms and making it work, they need to be given the tips and tricks and methods and approaches. So I think you need both in unison.
Yeah, that's great. That's great, Barry. Hey, Brian, Brian, do you want to just, I think some of the stuff that you're discovering in your research, and Brian's, on the team and been helping with the creation of the book. And he's been so awesome because he's able to see the forest for the trees, where I think Jen and I are so down, in the dirt itself, looking around for roots or maybe truffles, as it were. So.
Yeah, it's a great conversation. And one of the things I keep saying is that there's 2 theses I hear in the book and in this community. One is that open talent is a competitive advantage for your organization. So sort of stop, like that's a piece that we're trying to promote. But then, Neil, to your point, secondarily, and there are adoption risks and challenges. And this playbook and training and coaches and other things are going to help you come across those adoption risks and challenges. And I'm finding that as I interview people and sort of talk in the market, like until I assess if they've grasped number 1, I can't start talking about number 2, right? Because the adoption challenges aren't a great leader. Like, why would I go after this new thing that has a lot of adoption challenges to go with it? And so that's a big piece that I've been wrestling with and trying to talk through with John and team, is like, how do we just tell that really salivating take of the changing world and how open talent can move you forward personally and move your business forward. And then once you've sort of got people excited, then move into the John, your phrase of "and there be dragons," right? Like, let's talk about some of the dragons and how we're going to help you get around them.
Does everybody know that phrase, "there be dragons"? Yeah, and just kind of historically, it came from the idea when the first map makers started making globes in the 1500s. There was a bunch of white space on these continents, and they just labeled those as "there be dragons." And it motivated guys like Balaji to go out and like, I'm going to go find some dragons and slay them. I think for a lot of executives, they're like, we're staying away from those dragons. We're not going to go over there. We're going to stay over in Florence or wherever we were at the time. So I think that's an interesting paradigm shift, right? The explorers are willing to go explore that uncharted territory, no matter if it's open talent or anything else. And then other people are saying, well, let those guys go get, eaten by dragons. We're going to stay here and be productive. So
yeah, but I think the challenge that Hayden is feeling is a pretty standard challenge. It's not new for any software company, any enterprise software company. It is a problem as old as enterprise technology, right? And I totally agree. And it's not a unsolved problem. It's a combination of good marketing and good sales. End of story. Open talent is not a unique animal that needs to have a completely different solution. That is not just good marketing that is focused on who you want to sell to and having a good sales team to close the deals. There's no rocket science here. I just want us to ensure that when we talk so much about adoption and everything, we don't think about this is not a completely different dragon than doesn't have any other new challenges that other enterprise technology or others do. But it's also, I was just messaging Jeff Schwartz the same thing. It is, we think that open talent has big adoption challenges, whereas the other side, which is the staffing firms and contingent firms, which are, $20 billion companies, the biggest challenges for them, for the client side is, it's just they're too big. There's too many of them. We don't know where they are. So it's excessive. I wouldn't call it excess adoption. It is unfettered use. So there has to be a way to talk about external non-FTE talent at companies without making it feel like companies don't use them. They use them in droves, way too many of them. There's a particular modality that we have focused on, which is the marketplace, that they don't seem to be using a lot. And that's a question of the value proposition in many cases. It's not necessarily that there is a huge value proposition and all these companies are not adopting. We have to reflect internally as well.
No, I love that.
Yeah,
Jeff,
John,
I was just going to call you because I think you've done a lot of research and now you're a gloat.
Yeah, can you guys hear me, John?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have it's interesting. Balaji and I are good buddies. We worked together for years. I have a slightly different view. I do think it's fascinating that the staffing firms offer an interesting insight into what we're talking about, because they are very, very significant players, and they are actually using platforms in order to serve their clients, right? So you have this interest, and so that gets to one of the interesting points, which is, why are companies comfortable working with a third party who's using a platform but not using a third party themselves? Right. I think that helps us understand this adoption question. The other question, which I want to say is a tiny bit academic, is that open talent in some sense questions the whole premise of what does it mean to have a firm and what does it mean to have an enterprise. And so we keep coming back to sort of Ronald Coase and some of these discussions, which is like, when transaction costs change and what does it mean to actually have companies where you can run it entirely on markets, because digital markets are in some cases more efficient than administrative processes. Those are some pretty fundamental questions. Those are threatening questions. So I'm just raising both elements of it for the community, which is, I think that the staffing firms, when I talk to the people at them, they're using platforms, and they're using the platforms in order to serve their clients. Right. At the same time, it's threatening because we're organized around a certain operating model. This is John Hagel and JSB, the whole scalable efficiency model, and we're changing scalable efficiency because business is more customized, faster, et cetera. So just two observations on a really fantastic, what's the economist expression? crunchy question, John.
No, I totally, thanks, Jeff. I totally agree. And if you haven't read Jeff's book or his article, really work disrupted and the let's see, the workplace, what is it? It's workforce ecosystems.
Workforce ecosystems with a Sloan management review.
Both are really, really great stuff. Jeff's been doing some great work. No, I totally agree. I mean, I think it does, but it's an existential question for firms. It's like firms were built on a model of scarcity when talent was scarce and all resources were scarce. We're heading into this place where many resources are abundant, and that's a totally different mindset and totally different way to look at the world. So I think that's a huge shift that threatens everything inside a firm.
Well, I just add to that, not only that the assumption is that they were fixed, right? And human potential is not fixed, and that dynamic element is entirely new to the way that we run workforce strategies in organizations.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
I know John Healy wanted to make a comment. John.
What's that? John Healy? Yeah. Hey, John, go for it. Sorry, I'm on the second page. Yeah, go for it, Son. John or Son?
John Healy.
Nothing to add. I think you guys are on point.
Hey, Son.
Yeah, just a question for, I think, Jeff and Balaji in terms of, I guess, marketing, like, our stated objective as CTW. One of the conversations we had was, around not just top down or bottom up, but around approaching this through a lens of systems change or approaching through this lens of getting work done, getting a project done in a new way or a better way. And I was reflecting on it last night, given our stated objective, has enterprise had a belly full of systemic change? Certainly it's gone through systemic change in the last, few years, certainly around dealing with things like DEI and sustainability and things like that. If we look forward for the next 5 years, which encompass our stated objective, is systemic change, is that going to be an effective kind of marketing ploy or strategy to sell open talent, or do we need to actually flip over to get projects done? That makes sense.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback on that for a second, Son, and raise a very provocative question, which is the future of hourly based pay. Right. I think hourly based pay is absolutely in contrast to the objectives of the client. Right. I mean, if you're paying somebody by the hour, the longer it takes for them to do it, the more money they make, and the worse it is for you. And so, I'd love to see some dialogue about, more outcome based or task based models and what's the fair price of getting work done. At the end of the day, the client, the people who are paying the money are most interested in the outcome, getting a quality outcome, and not paying an hourly rate for somebody to do work, right?
I mean, Neil, it's interesting, if you Upwork launched this project catalog, which is deliverable based, outcome based work, and the pushback from the freelancers was huge, because like, how can you, unless there's a scale in terms of the definition of task, the more defined the task is, there seems to be a shorter task that will result from it, because if you want to develop mockups or something like that, there is a lot of nuance and changes and account and feedback, and you're accounting for all of that. And unless there's a really awesome software that kind of measures all work that's happening across the world, and then now says this is the bell curve of where the mean sits for that deliverable, there is no way to know what is the true value, or at least the true price of that deliverable. And I haven't seen any work to get there. So it is ideal, but it is two reasons why I find it very difficult that it'll happen anytime in the near future. It is less attractive for freelancers, because they're like, I feel like I'm putting in a box when the client has a lot more flexibility. The second is, clients are very lazy. They don't want to define that stuff. They don't know the answer to define that stuff. They are used to saying, I'm going to create a team, give it to them, and let them figure it out, is how the world works. And I think changing those two parameters, or at least that that seems to be like a huge barrier to move to large scale, high value, outcomes based work.
Yeah, and I don't disagree, Balaji, with the complexity of task-based pricing, right? until like you said, we have a good database of tasks and what it costs to deliver and what a fair price is. But my point is that there's no dialogue happening about it, right? I mean, I think that there is this contention, this natural contention that you're going to see grow as we push books and theories and adoption of freelance markets. I think that dialogue should be taking place, and I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's an important part of the dialogue. I know as a freelancer, I was just reflecting as you were talking, Balaji, I used to do a lot of work on GLG, the platform GLG, and I really liked it as a freelancer. It was really efficient and I got paid, decent amount. I think they billed me out at $500 an hour. And then literally in the last couple of years, they would say, you've won the project, but other people are, in the finals of getting this project. And here's a slider, and your rate is higher than other people's. You can adjust what you're willing to work for an hourly basis all the way down to $0 an hour. And after a few times playing with that, it was obvious that it was a race to the bottom. I mean, really great for GLG, right? Really great for the platform, but not so great for the freelancers. I just decided I couldn't do it anymore. That it just was this kind of really quick race down to zero, which was kind of a bummer. Hey, Gavin, I know you've had your hand up. Please jump in.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something quickly about outcomes based, and I think that is the future. But I think it's also something we need to be cognizant of, that's not a new concept. That's something that's existed for hundreds of years. The silk weavers in Asia pioneered some of that, and they understood the value of creating products beyond an hourly rate, and we've lost that. We became focused on day rates and hourly rates throughout the past century. What I think one of the issues for organizations is that no one holds a mirror up to the organization and says, what's the cost of standing still? What's the cost of working with your internal network? What's the cost of working with your supply chain? What's the cost of maintaining the status quo? In other words, keep doing this and your market share is just being eroded. So why do we need to create a convincing case to pivot towards open talent, open innovation? And I think if you look at work that's been done by organizations like Strategizer and Alexander Osterwalder, you can show in one slide exactly what the value proposition is and why you should be pursuing things beyond a day rate and to a new model.
That's great. Yeah, good points.
We have to remember that we're living in a skeptical time, right? Where people are dealing with a lot of different challenges. And as somebody who used to sit in the procurement seat and advise people in the procurement seat, you're sold to constantly by everybody telling you that their solution is the best and that they're solving all these other problems. But meanwhile, you have the immediacy of the now that you're dealing with. And if you're stuck with solving, tactical day-to-day problems, you're not really going to be thinking in the clouds about the risk of loss, and I think that the promises that come and the benefits of leveraging open talent, there's a great quote that is, the smartest people in the world just don't work within your organization. That's just a fact. People kind of know that, but in dealing with the problems that they're being confronted with, they go to what they know how to use, and they go to what is the safest choice. So I agree to a large extent with Balaji that the technologies are certainly not new, but in the panoply of choices, where they can solve with BAU as opposed to some of these newer things, it's just easier to do what they know, and it's just easier to do that.
That's great, Brian. No, I really appreciate that perspective for sure. And speaking of, Stephen Wellbeloved, I mean, you've been bringing this up all the time about the immediacy of solving the problem, right? Like, I gotta, fill these slots that are open for my clients today. Like, what am I going to do?
Yeah, and I think building, but I just wanted to thanks, John, to sort of bring out, I guess, the fundamental thing I found in trying to be the internal champion for human cloud platform adoption in a large technology services organization is the preconceived ideas that people have of such things. and more fundamentally what their freelance strategy is. That sort of borders on organizational change and things. Those things, if they're not really addressed, they'll continue, as Brian just said. What's wrong with using local contractors where we can control them more? We're not using a platform that's got members across the globe. We can send them laptops from each local office in each country. There's a big step around how do you want to use freelancers, amongst augmenting your existing permanent and contingent workers. So I think that was the fundamental issue that we faced.
That's great. That's
John,
great. Hey, Satish, thanks for being here.
So the outcome-based project is very interesting concept, and I think Balaji pointed out that that unless there is scope defined for the project, so freelancers are not really comfortable with that. And on the other hand, the company do not want to specify that because they're lazy. The missing piece in that is the confidence that with the open-ended definition, still the project will get done. And that missing piece is really competency of the individual. And I think John just pointed out that there is a rating of, there is scale of the slider of the payment, how much I can really charge. And I think if you bring the notion of competency with the rate card, it's like a shopping cart now, right? If I want some developer to do certain work, hey, I need the greatest developer in the world, but the moment you put a rate card sheet, well, now they will think about, do I need really the greatest one, or maybe a middle can do the job? I think the bringing that competency piece, matchmaking both together, then even though the scope is not defined, I think they're confident enough to get it done, right? Of course, the overall project budget will change, but really, how do we make the right matchmaking with the right people with the right project, even though the definition is not that defined? But we know that they are the competence needed to get the job done.
Really good points. Yes, thanks, Satish. Hey, Todd, you got your hand up as well.
I was just going to add that I'm putting it into the chat, and Diane pointed out, and Steve, I have concerns about outcome-based work applying from a microeconomic perspective and a macroeconomic perspective, how this is supposed to work, simply because it shifts the risk of doing business onto the workforce. And the workforce isn't going to tolerate that, at least long term. The reward that they get for taking on that risk doesn't justify the work. That's a fundamental problem that I think you're going to face. So Steve, when you do that on a worker basis, it's a scope of work. The worker's an expert. They're going to be able to get the job done. They know how much to charge for it. But when you use an open talent or even an open innovation approach to that, it shifts that risk reward, the principal agent problem. That's what this becomes. It's a moral hazard.
It definitely can. I don't know that it has to in all cases. And I would say what for organizations, what they should realize is they are basically spending a ton of money internally with their resources because they basically don't have that problem, right? They basically have that risk realized. They're wasting a lot of their resources because their workers have no consequence. If they don't get it done today, okay, well, Well,
no, that's not true. The worker does have a consequence. They lose their job. But remember, the worker doesn't make the margins of profit in exchange for the risk that the company takes. Big business makes money because they take the risk. The worker does not. The worker sorry, go ahead.
Go for it, Diane.
Completely agree, and it is a risk, but if we believe in open markets, right, and free markets, then theoretically, right, this is completely theoretical exercise. But if we shift the outcome ownership to the worker, right, then in a free market, the worker can control their margin, right, and they can now make the risk reward decision. Theoretically, right, and they can choose to respond to those outcome engagements that make sense for their risk reward trade-off, right? Theoretically, and the sponsors, or real quickly, the sponsors of those outcomes engagements will learn that if they're not pricing those outcomes competitively or structuring them competitively, no one's going to pick them up. And so they're going to have to learn that they're going to be, they're going to need to restructure their compensation in order to compete for the talent.
I completely agree with that. The only concern, and again, you're talking theoretically, and I love that, is you're talking about a workforce of billions of people. So the worker is now competing for the same job on a massive scale. And when you look at the macroeconomic perspective of this, it starts to fall apart.
Yeah. No, I think all really good points. And, for me, as I reflect on myself, I've always been an entrepreneur and always started out as a business of one and built business from scratch. And it's always been outcomes oriented, right? I mean, Diane, you're experiencing that right now, right? It's like, nobody cares really what you're charging hourly. It's like, I need to get this project done. I'm going to hire Shoshin. Like, it's tough, right? It's tough as an entrepreneur, a micro entrepreneur, to say, where should I price? Who else is competing? Like, what are the market forces? All those kind of things. So I think that's, it's a whole new mindset and skill set that for workers. I want Dave to jump in here because he's had his hand up. Just raise your hand, Sheila, if you want to jump in. And then we got to get to the playbook as well, if we could, after a couple more of these.
Just
Dave,
to pile on that. I mean, we've done a lot of the outcomes-based model. Like, I can tell you one example we did for a large consumer product group that wanted to do like color contacts, and they needed an algorithm to identify like how to change the color of your pupil, right, or your iris. And we just said, hey, that's going to be $2,000 to do it or something like that, right? A guy did it in 2 days. The internal development firm probably could have done that in 3 weeks because they were smart people, but having someone that has that experience with the algorithm and that stuff, they're able to turn around in 2 days. And that guy probably took him 2 days or whatever. It probably only spent 3 or 4 hours on it and made a ton of money. So I think the fixed outcomes, if they're well defined and people understand it and people can make their own value choice on it versus like maybe a bid to the lowest bidder, I think that's how you kind of drive the outcomes to across scale, across large group of workers, in my opinion. And I've seen it work time and time again in many examples.
Yeah, man, this is such a great dialogue. I love this. Thanks, guys. Really, really helpful, not just for the group, because I love it, but also for the book, as we're trying to get our arms around all this stuff and get it into one place. Should we transition over so I can just show you guys the playbook here really quickly? Is that cool? Okay. Catherine, can you pop that up? Is that possible? All right. So here it is. And let's make sure, hey, Brandon, let's make sure that everybody on the call gets a copy of it via email. Maybe we could just send out a group email and then just put the link to, place it on the Google Drive or something, so everybody has access. Well, first of all, really appreciate the partnership with Topcoder and Mike Morris and Mass and the team. And then Magenta was instrumental in making this happen. Really amazing work, Mark. This was idea that we had, but really you guys made it come to life. And so the concept behind this was, one of the things we wanted to do was create a framework that we could use for the book to create some movement around making sure that we're starting to agree on language, right? And so the idea that we have some kind of slow down there a little bit, Catherine. I can't keep up there. If you go back, yeah. So obviously in the front, a lot of stuff around what's happening in the marketplace, and we really believe in this concept, that came out of the U.S. War College of VUCA. This kind of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. These are kind of new market conditions, new way of viewing things, and we've got to build organizations that can support that. Flip to the next one if you could. Yeah. So the idea is to build a framework, and we're calling it a networked organization. There's been a lot of really great work around networked organizations, but one of the things we find intellectually and academically is that everything that's been done in the context of networked organizations really is inside the organization. And we really believe in what, Jeff and Liz talk about, this kind of workforce ecosystems that are way beyond the firm. So redefining the firm beyond just the borders of traditionally what was seen. I mean, the key, we started off with the title open the open talent solution, we're kind of, really focused on the idea that it's really open, agile, and networked, that it's open talent, agile process, and networked organization in those broad terms. And one of the things we wanted to do is create a framework that seems to start defining things in a way that organizations at the C level can start feeling comfortable that there's a pathway forward to allow for this, especially when many people inside the firm are starting to think about it. So at the core, what we talked about is the networked organization. It really starts with a network mindset, and we're really building off the growth mindset work that Carol Dweck focused on. Really like that work. And then the culture, the networked culture, really what we're seeing is that we started, Kristen Hammersberg talked about the learning culture, which was really instrumental in our thinking. We've really dug a little bit deeper to see that curiosity and creativity is really important in the culture. And then on the strategy side of things, we're thinking about it in the context of, not just when we use the word agile, I think sometimes we get stuck with thinking about software development, and we're really calling it the light and fast strategy as a way to kind of make sure we don't get caught in that technology loop. And this is where, when you go to the chart here, this is where this implementation flywheel on the outside of the chart really starts working, kind of the assess, learn, experiment, build, scale, and transform. That's really built from Jeff Davis's great work that he did after working with, launching COSI and working at NASA for a long time. So we feel like that's the implementation for the strategy, that if it's a light and fast strategy, here are the 6 steps to make sure you can do that. And then we really think about, building this system and applying this kind of implementation strategy, or the strategy implementation, through kind of 6 different areas: communications, org structure, leadership, operations, and relationships. So the rest of the playbook kind of lays that out. I mean, maybe we can just give everybody a little tour of the rest of the playbook. Catherine, can you go to the next page? Thanks. So the mindset, like I said, really focused on growth mindset and some of the principles: motivate, reframe, reimagine, unlearn, incentivize, and celebrate. Can we go to the next? Yeah, again, comparing kind of a growth mindset to fixed. Okay, next. And then the culture, learn, share, and grow, really focused on what is curiosity and how you do that. I think, the story that I tell in the beginning of culture is just the horrible job I did at Boss. David Jones and I had this vision of, really changing the organization in a big way. Am I still connected? Yeah, okay, good. But yet, we failed to take into some of the cultural considerations. So if those of you who've read that case study, it's pretty obvious that there was a disconnect there. And we're kind of using that learning from the failure to think more about curiosity and solving the cultural question. Move on, good. So the strategy, again, thinking about light and fast strategy and focusing on being responsive, pull versus push, being efficient, being, the commitment, and then focused and engaged. Okay. And then the implementation, like how to implement the strategy. And obviously the goal here, the playbook, was to be kind of a lightweight outline for, what the book can become. And I really, really appreciate, there have been several people who've dove in and given us lots of good feedback, and definitely rearranged a lot of, starting to rearrange this in the context of the book, really building in lots of case studies and stories that support this. All right, next. And then the systems is just kind of holding things together, that this is kind of the idea that here are 6 potential areas that you could focus on: communications, org structure, leadership, operations, and relationships, to be able to implement an open talent strategy, or a network strategy, as it were. And again, in the back of the playbook, more specifics of what you can do to do this in each of these areas, from communications and these 6 steps, and then in org structure. One of the things that we've really launched into, and I've just finished this chapter this week, but really thinking about, and Steve, this is a lot of inspiration from you, but starting at, looking internally with a platform like NASA at Work, or the Commonwealth Bank that Jesse Arundel's doing down in Australia, and then engage kind of with the existing network you have, evolve your contingent workforce process, bring in the larger crowd, and then co-create with customers. All right, next one. And then I'm really thinking about, we've been thinking about leadership. I like a lot of the research that's been done around agility in leadership and thinking about it in that context. So, creating a vision for transformation, psychological safety, emotional resilience, being flexible, and promoting conviction. Again, there's a lot more detail that's going to go into the book because each of these chapters is 15 to 20 pages. So next. In operations, what we're thinking about in operations are what are those enabling collaborative technologies? How do we prioritize partnerships over structure, plan for change, and create kind of organizational standards just in the midst of starting that chapter. And then lastly, but not least, is the relationships. I think that's really, really critical. As we've seen, one of the things that's slowing down adoption is this issue with any kind of external, or at least in my experience, any kind of external open talent solution usually means there's a lot of nervousness between current employees or current structures that start becoming really threatened by that. And so how do we get over that? In our research, especially Mike Tushman's research, it's all about these systems create kind of a crisis of identity for internal players. And so how do we come over that and be able to build systems that allow for these relationships to be more more fluid and help everybody on each side. Okay, next page. Yeah, so we just have 10 steps, what we think are kind of 10 keys to success. Here they are laid out. And again, Jeff Davis and Mark Hanot and the education work stream done a fantastic job of working on this and really developing a lot of this stuff. So really thankful for that. So that's it. That's the playbook. There's some other, theories and information in there, but still it's pretty lightweight. Oh, big call out to Ashley. Ashley, thanks a lot for doing the glossary. Again, a super lightweight glossary, but something we're going to focus on being a lot more robust in the book. But I'd encourage you guys, definitely, there are no sacred cows here. There are lots of stuff we've gotten wrong, and our hope is to fail a lot at this level, that we can fail at the playbook level, explore it, pull it apart, and it'll be part of the conversation that goes into the book, and do a much better job of explaining not only the marketplace, but what needs to happen. So I know we're kind of limited on time. We just had such a good dialogue going there. So sorry we didn't get to the playbook till the end. I'm sure there's lots of questions. I can take a couple questions now, even though we're out of time, but also let me get that into your guys' hands over the next week. And then the next meeting, we can kind of go deeper if you guys have specific questions that you want to dig into. Anything? Any questions, thoughts?
John, just real quickly, a question for the group, perhaps. I put this in the chat, but didn't see any reactions. There's been a lot of great chat there, which is awesome. But the question is, right, capitalism, I would posit, is a meritocracy, right? The companies that do great succeed. That's the way things work. And I would suggest that open talent is viewed the same way, right? I mean, the folks that do well should be successful. Would anybody disagree with that?
No, I would stretch that, Neil, to take it one step above, saying anybody that is able to provide external talent, agnostic of how uncool they are, as long as it can make it successful, will be successful.
So that will be is where I would kind of focus a dialogue in the future, John, is how do we create a meritocracy for our customers, right? So for anybody adopting open talent, how do you ensure that the people who do the work the best get the best work? And that's not an obvious thing.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, Neil. The way I framed that is that, firms, I had an opportunity to work with some amazing, ad agencies that were global in scope. And, essentially how I viewed those firms as they're matching agents, right? You call Havas or you call Crispin Porter Bogusky because you need a great art director, you need to solve a problem, and you're going in, you're going to get charged 5 times a person's salary, right? And it just so happens now that there's digital technology that gives you the ability to match in a much better way. So, and I would say that's not exclusive. That's not exclusive just to the talent world, but any kind of technology process is cutting out that matching cost of finding the right solution and solving that. And so for me, I totally agree with this, that the best, and we already see that. I think that you see it on all the platforms. And Dave, you could probably talk to this mess, you know, that as you see the best performers, they understand it's a meritocracy. They're competitive. They do work. They find different ways to win contests on Top Coder, to do, you know, exceptional work on Upwork or whatever those things are. But I totally agree with that. And I think it's teaching a whole class of people new kinds of skills. It's not the tactical skill of doing a great graphic design project for a PowerPoint. You know, so it's the entrepreneurial skill of how do I sell that service? How do I position myself? All those kinds of things. So really love that thought, Neil. And I think let's take this up on the next call and we can dig deeper, and would love to get your guys' feedback on the playbook and anything you see that could be improved. So thanks,
Great
guys.
start. Looks good, John.
Thanks so much. Look forward to your feedback. All the best, guys.